jump right into it. For you guys that didn't catch our post-game show, Texas beats Texas A&M 17-7. Really dominant performance. Texas on defense does not give up any points. Gerald, let's jump into it and just recap it for those people that maybe didn't watch the whole game or just stuff we missed on. What was some of the good you saw in this game from Texas?
Yeah, I mean the biggest good is Texas's ability to control the line of scrimmage and play honestly on A&M's side of the line of scrimmage. The tackles for loss, keeping them from creating any sort of momentum. They're a team that wants to run the ball to create opportunities. They're wanting to set up Marcel Reed on zone read. They're wanting to do all those things. And the Texas defensive front seven was not having any of it, right? It was one of their worst performances of the year. I think it's the first time all year they didn't crack 100 yards rushing. Like, not a great outing. Texas just flat dominated them at the point of attack, kept their running game going. And it was a Pete Kwiatkowski special. He saw that Marcel Reed wants to run those zone reads. They want to run that offensive scheme through him. And so, like, nope, we're going to make you pass the ball and try to beat us. And ultimately, A&M couldn't do that. So Texas's ability to limit and hamper what a team wants to do on offense continues to amaze me. Pete Kwiatkowski continues to be just an absolute baller of a defensive coordinator. I think a lot of folks said some mean things about him early in his tenure at Texas, but he has completely flipped that narrative. That, to me, is the biggest good from the game, is that the Texas defense continues to acquit itself really, really well. And I think the other thing that we have to say is the Texas running game and the offensive line are finding their stride at the right time. It was touch and go for a couple of weeks in the middle of the season, but over the last probably 4 games, Texas has really found its stride. Quintravian Weisner has found his stride, and the offense is better for it.
Yeah, 100%. We needed someone to step up in that room. We kind of had been juggling back and forth of the hot hand. Well, we found the hot hand. Quintravian Weisner is definitely the hot hand at this point. You got to keep feeding him. And he's also a guy, honestly, that's not putting the ball on the ground. That was the biggest issue with Jaden Blue, is putting the ball on the ground. Trey Weisner doesn't seem to do that as much. Jarrett Gibson did get 1 carry, and that was only because Trey Weisner got nicked up. And then Jaden Blue also got nicked up. So they're like, okay, here you go, 1 carry. We'll see if we see him on short yardage situations. They may have just used Arch Manning in that sort of role from now on, where if you need short yards, you go with Arch Manning. We'll see about that. It's going to be very interesting how they utilize that going forward. And there's a couple clips. Bobby Burton will put one out of DJ Campbell just blowing. I think it was Shamar Stewart off the ball like 2 to 3 yards. And that, my concern was early in the year was the right side of the offensive line. You see Cam Williams with the procedural penalties. He would get it. Basically, you could guarantee a holding call every game for him. DJ Campbell would also get beat pretty easily on some certain concepts. And so far, the last month, whatever they did during that second bye week before Florida really has worked, because that right side of the offensive line is playing much better. Early on, they played pretty well, but the Georgia game and a couple games there, it kind of got rocky. So whatever they did to fix that has worked beautifully. They're starting to play like the best offensive line in the country, which we all thought going into the season it was going to be them and LSU in their own separate tier, and they're starting to be in their own separate tier now. So it's really nice to see that, especially at this time during the year. The thing that I really like to see is Quinn Ewers' mobility in the pocket. That was something I don't know what the hell happened in that Georgia game. I will never know. I just don't understand what happened. He just refused to step up in the pocket. He refused to move even side to side in the pocket. As soon as he moved any way, he was just abandoning the pocket, just running for his life out of it, even though sometimes there weren't even rushes there. And it all confused us. Like, is it still the injury? What is it? And in my perception now, I think it's a confidence thing. And I think we've seen Quinn deal with that on and off the field. I don't think he's the most confident human being, just straight up, just watching him in press conferences and anything, but he's definitely learned to become that a little bit more. And I think that also translates onto the field. And I think when he finds success early in games and you can get him in the rhythm, he becomes more confident. He's definitely a rhythm passer. And it's kind of weird. If the same with being a rhythm passer, he's rhythm with everything. Like if it's going well, he's good at moving up in the pocket, good at delivering on the run. I think the perfect example of that was the Gunnar Helm play on 3rd down, where he steps up and he makes the defender decide, are you going to come to me or are you going to go to him? So he does a little soft pump fake and then just lobs it over the top of him. And that was a beautiful play from Quinn Ewers. And it's something that we saw that in the Michigan game a lot. Like, if I had to put the best tape of pocket mobility for Quinn Ewers, that was that whole game. I would have literally said, here, NFL scout, watch this. This is the best Quinn Ewers has looked at doing this. And then from there, it's just been completely downhill. And then you see it start to come back up again the last couple weeks. And that is very important because, listen, did this offensive line get beat versus Georgia? Yes. But did they get his beat as bad as the stats would say? 7 sacks? Absolutely not. I think if you were actually watching the film, you could credit maybe 2 to 3 to the offensive line. The rest were on Quinn Ewers abandoning clean pockets and not stepping up in the pocket. And the best example of that was he did not step up when Jalen Walker got beat so bad. He was on the ground and then tripped Quinn Ewers. If he steps up 1 foot, there's no one. He has a clean pocket. And we saw that in this game. He did that very well. There was only 1 sack, and that was completely on Jaden Blue. He blew that block. I don't know what he was doing there. You talked about that in the postgame, Gerald. I don't know what it was going on there. And we still don't really have that guy. Cedric Baxter is definitely the best running back blocker on the team for sure. Yeah. And that's part of the reason as a freshman, he was getting on the field so much. That guy's a very physical just player in general, whether it's running or pass blocking. So the Quinn mobility is definitely a really good thing to see. Another thing that I liked in this game were it was everyone on the defense eating on the defense line. It wasn't just a certain player. Vernon Broughton had a drive. Barron Sorrell had a player too. Ethan Burke had a player too. And Ethan Burke's kind of gone MIA for a little bit, but then he stops it on that 4th down play. Beautiful play by him. Bill Norton again gets credit for that because he submarined that play. I mean, he was laying in the backfield 2 yards. So it's just beautiful to see multiple guys from that defensive line making plays, and especially Vernon Broughton. Vernon Broughton had gone kind of quiet, and then he had a hell of a game versus Texas A&M. So overall, just a really good game I think for the team as a whole. There's still some aspects I would like to see get better, but a lot got better in this A&M game, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah. And I think ultimately when it comes down to it, the question going into the game, I think, was what can Texas do against a potent ground attack like A&M's going to bring? They had played athletic quarterbacks before, but none, I think, were on the level of what Marcel Reed brings to the table. They neutralized that. They really played and controlled the pace of the game. They made A&M play the game that they wanted to play. And that ultimately is what a championship level defense does, is they say, you're going to play in our yard. We're not going to play in your yard. And we're going to keep, and there was a lot of talk after the game about how not intense the crowd was. And part of that was because the defense shut their offense up. The best way to get a crowd going is to have a big offensive play. And it just didn't happen, right? The only time the crowd really was a factor was after that pick 6. And so the defense kept the offense kind of mundane and kept the offense and kept the crowd out of it. So that was huge for me. And I want to backtrack to what you're talking about with Quinn Ewers. There's this weird, Quinn Ewers is his own worst critic, but also the things that he does really well are the things that also frustrate me about Quinn Ewers. He is supremely confident in his arm and in his passing ability in a lot of ways, but also you look at that kind of lob pass that should have been intercepted. That's a play that, he's been making that play since South Lake Carroll, but he's not the most talented guy on the field, right? And you see the first time he really plays players that are on the level of his talent. Michael Taft intercepts him multiple times in the state championship game, right? So there is that to be said about Quinn Ewers as well. As I think some of the plays that he makes that are frustrating, some of the putting the ball in peril, and even the way he was carrying the ball on that scramble, I think some of it can be boiled down to he trusts himself almost a little too much in some spots, and then other spots he doesn't trust himself enough. And it's this weird back and forth of are we going to get supremely confident good Quinn Ewers? Are we going to get supremely confident overthrows wide receivers all day Quinn Ewers? Are we going to get Quinn Ewers that doesn't trust himself, plays hesitant, trips over his own feet? There are these 3 different Quinn Ewers that we get. And I'm curious to see. Big games are generally the trust myself and rocket the ball off and win games for Texas type of games for Quinn Ewers. So I'm curious to see what and who shows up in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and that goes for both quarterbacks. I said in the postgame, I think there's a lot of similarities between Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers, and they both played god-awful games the last time these two teams played. Literally only the difference was Carson Beck turned the ball over on his side of the field deep in the red zone, whereas Quinn Ewers was turning it on our side of the field in our own red zone, and that's why Georgia won the football game. That's literally the only difference between the two. They both played terrible. Carson Beck had 3 interceptions. His yards per attempt was 4.3. That is abysmal, not good at all. You want a quarterback to be around 7.5 to 8. Elite guys like Jaden Daniels averaged 10.2 or something like that last year. So that's elite of the elite. 4.3 is god awful. That's high school quarterback getting dropped in playing college level. It's really bad. So it's going to be interesting. I think honestly, whatever guy doesn't turn the ball over, in this game, that's probably the team that's going to win the football game. Whatever quarterback plays the cleanest. I don't even need him to be great, but who plays the cleanest football game.
I've been saying that about Quinn Ewers since I think the game on Saturday, right? Like, we don't need Quinn Ewers to be the world beater. We just need him to not beat himself and beat Texas, right? That was the big difference in the Georgia game the last time. The 3 turnovers, right? And we can also talk about how Texas not scoring off of Georgia's turnovers, giving the ball right back to them. 15-point game. You turn any of those into points, it's a whole different ball game. So, like, we don't need Quinn Ewers to win the game by himself. He's got plenty of help. Right, he's got plenty of help defensively. He's got some help on the offense as well. Like, just don't lose the game for Texas, and I think things will go well.
100%. Now let's talk about some of the bad that went down, because there were a couple things. I'll hit on this one first. Special teams. It just has to be good. It doesn't have to be great. I don't need guys returning touchdowns. I just need guys catching punts. I need guys getting the punts off and the blocking to be good. And I need Bert Auburn to be money under 40 yards. If you can give me those things, I think that is good enough to win a national championship with this team. You cannot, like versus Georgia, if you get a blocked punt versus that team, they're going to capitalize. They're going to score points off of that. Yeah. If you miss 45-yard field goals and set them up on short fields, they'll score points off that. And even if you want to talk past Georgia in this game, if you get into the college football playoff, those type of things cost you. You see that all the time. Just go watch Sundays in the NFL, because all those games are decided by little things like that. When you start to get into the elite tier of college football, where there's even more parity, it's the exact same thing. So we have to just clean things up in that area. And then still, Jaden Blue didn't get very many carries this game. If he gets a lot of carries, don't fumble the football. That's all I care about. Do not fumble the football. I actually like the way Sark kind of utilized him in this game. Is basically he's more of a receiver than anything, and I think that is his best skill set. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But those are the 2 main things going into this game and moving forward into the rest of the season, and what hopefully is a very long season, that we have to get better if we want to reach the peak of college football.
My favorite special teams games are ones when you don't notice the special teams players, right? Yeah. I don't want to have a conversation about special teams. And that's no dig at the punters and kickers and specialists and all that. You have a vital role, but your best skill as a punter or as a kicker or as a holder or as a snapper is for me not to notice you on a Saturday, right? I don't want to have a conversation about a punter not being in the right spot. I don't want to have a conversation about the holder not getting the ball down correctly. The best special teams games are ones that I don't have to have a conversation about. We're just like, yep, those are great. Didn't have anything to talk about. It's completely unremarkable. And that to me is going to be a differentiator. And, you know, when you're playing a team with the talent of Georgia, and we're spinning it ahead a little bit here, like those little mistakes compound. Right. And we've seen it. Those little mistakes in footwork, those little mistakes in execution, they compound. And Georgia is very clearly not last year's Georgia or not 2 years ago's Georgia, but they are still the highest blue chip ratio in the country. They are still the team with all of the NFL guys on it. It's like on any given day they can pop off. And so it's on Texas to avoid the things that they did on Saturday. We're putting the ball in conflict. Don't throw it into tight windows. There were multiple times that Quinn Ewers should have had a ball intercepted, and it just didn't happen, right? Bryce Anderson whiffed on one, and Gunnar Helm kind of sunned him on a little bit, saw some bounce off hands as well. Like that to me is what I want to see from Quinn Ewers moving forward and from the offense moving forward. Is like, I don't need the quarterback to be the winner. I don't. At this point, we know what Texas is and what Texas isn't. And so looking at that game, the inability to make smart decisions in tight windows is something that I'm curious about. Make the right reads, get comfortable. You'll never go broke making a profit. So the check down is always your best friend, right? So like that to me is what I want to see. And it was okay on Saturday, but there were some spots that Texas threw, and Quinn Ewers threw some interceptable balls that did not get picked off and kept things from getting squirrelier earlier.
Yeah, 100%. He tends to throw some balls, definitely, that should be intercepted. I mean, the Will Wee one was just so bad. It was so late across the middle and just lofted. There was nothing behind it. That was kind of like, you know what? Let's hope this gets caught. We'll see what happens type of throw. But yeah, I agree. It just has to be better going forward if we want to reach that pinnacle, because you have to be good in the little details and
Yep.
not make key mistakes too. So we'll see what happens, but that does it for the Texas A&M recap. Again, 17-7 for you guys that didn't watch the whole game or didn't see the final score. I'm sure most people that are going to watch this or were watching did, but there's